No case has ever exposed human hypocrisy and Hollywood's hypocrisy so much. On one side, accusation after accusation.
Do you have any advice for a young girl moving to,
Okay. An accusation that Weinstein invited someone to a private party at the Four Seasons Tokyo.
On the other hand, blatant sycophancy.
I would like to thank Harvey Weinstein. Thank you, Harvey Weinstein, my agent, Kevin Eubank, and God, Harvey Weinstein.
The story of one of the most powerful and influential men in Hollywood is a scandal. It was almost 40 years of abuse without any punishment. The guy manipulated the entire industry. Actors, directors, careers were in his hands. He had so much power behind the scenes that, according to many, even the results of the Oscars went through him. The guy built such a strong network of power that nothing could bring him down. And here I'm going to explain all of that to you. I'll show you how he gained influence, manipulated, and abused without getting caught, plus more. You will understand the mechanism of success that many people ignore, but that explains very well why we so often see psychopaths reaching such important and relevant positions in this world. This is the topic of my latest documentary on the platform. It's heavy stuff, not afraid to lay bare the truth, to expose stories, figures of power, and to show a side of success that's almost forbidden in our society, which is well hidden behind many pretty speeches we see out there.
There's a kindly, wonderful gentleman that we all deeply love. His name is Harvey Weinstein, and this is a good man. People don't know that, but he's done a lot of good things in life. They'll write an article about that someday, too.
Harvey Weinstein was born in 1952 in New York, the son of a middle-class family. And from an early age, what stood out was not his artistic talent, but his aggressive ambition. As soon as he finished school in the 70s, still very young, he left the traditional path and started promoting shows and rock concerts with his brother Bob. It was a small business, but it grew quickly. In no time, they were already bringing in names like Frank Sinatra and the Rolling Stones. People who knew him always described the same thing. He was a pretty difficult guy, controlling, impatient, with an almost unhealthy obsession with winning. But one thing was undeniable. Harvey really knew how to play the game. He was a great negotiator, impressed everyone, and always turned situations in his favor. He was the kind of guy who wasn't ashamed to go after what he wanted, you know? He would call, insist, push until he got what he wanted. He just didn't care. And it was with that attitude that this rock concert company made him enough money in the late 70s to start a small independent film distribution company called Miramax. In the beginning, everything was normal, nothing glamorous. It was a new market for him. He didn't have any contacts or anything, so he started by picking up small, very niche films, things that the big studios ignored. And even though he had chosen the film industry, he wasn't the kind of guy with an artistic profile, a great connoisseur of cinema. He was much more of an operator, you know, a real businessman. In the 80s, after some time learning about the market and understanding what worked, he kept buying cheap films, but now he started making radical changes. He would take the film to edit it when necessary. Sometimes he would even re-release it. He changed the marketing, the narrative. Basically, he tried everything to make the film catch on. And if it didn't sell, he wouldn't accept it. The guy wouldn't rest until it started selling. And many directors obviously hated that. Imagine a guy coming in and fearlessly meddling with the film you made. That's why, even back then, it was very common for people to complain about his attitude. They called him authoritarian, intrusive, someone who would run over anyone to get results. But in the end, there was one thing they had to agree on. Regardless of the magic he worked, it usually worked out.
It was common knowledge. Everybody knew what a brutal regime it was. He worked beyond the limits of normal human beings.
It's no wonder that during the 80s, as he grew, he learned a hell of a lot about how to operate in this industry. He made important contacts, learned how to influence critics, how to position a film, how to promote it, basically how to masterfully play this game behind the scenes. And Weinstein realized right away, man, that success in Hollywood goes way beyond making a good movie. You have to know how to convince the right people that it's good. And then in '89, we see his magic really starting to work. That's the year when the first big turning point in his career happens. Steven Soderbergh's film Sex, Lies, and Videotape explodes. And suddenly, that small independent distributor becomes one of the main players in the industry. Miramax starts to bother the big players. It makes a name for itself in Hollywood. And in '93, 3 years after the success of The Crying Game, Disney buys Miramax for $80 million. But Harvey doesn't give up creative control of the company, which meant that now he had the money and structure of a giant without losing the freedom to act like an independent company. Now he had the freedom to do whatever he wanted and with much more power in his hands. And it's right at this stage that he starts to become the all-powerful figure in Hollywood, a dictator, as many described him, where things were either done his way or they simply didn't happen. But the fact is, regardless of his methods, he kept delivering great results.
I knew he was a bully. I knew he would stop at nothing to get what he wanted. I knew he had a volcanic temper. I knew he was a dangerous character. But I also knew that he was at the epicenter of where I wanted to be.
In '94, Quentin Tarantino's film Pulp Fiction comes out. It was a movie that nobody really bet on at the time, but it became a huge hit. Harvey was establishing himself as the guy who turned unlikely bets into cultural phenomena. He was becoming someone people in the industry looked to. And then the more he won, the more power he accumulated. And the more power he had, the more authority he had, and the fewer people questioned him. And in the following years, he racked up one success after another, The English Patient. In '97, The English Patient won the Oscar for Best Picture. In '98, Good Will Hunting was a huge hit. And in '99, Shakespeare in Love. Shakespeare in Love surprisingly wins the Oscar for Best Picture. And it's at this point in the story that things start to get a little weird. Because the fact that Shakespeare in Love beat out the big favorite that year, which was the movie Saving Private Ryan, caught a lot of people's attention. This sparked a debate that went far beyond Hollywood. And this happened because Saving Private Ryan was almost unanimously considered the best film of the year. It was a highly praised film, loved by the audience. In fact, war veterans said it was the most realistic war movie ever made. Everyone expected to see it win that year. And when that didn't happen, people started to think that there was something very suspicious going on. I would like to thank Harvey. From then on, it was always the same thing repeating over and over again. Movies that often weren't very good were winning awards. The speeches always included a special thank you to Harvey Weinstein, who found Soldier.
And made this movie.
Harvey, thank you to Harvey Weinstein for his commitment, and to Harvey Weinstein and everyone at Miramax. But I have to thank Harvey. If there was a moment when he showed all his power, that moment was at the Oscars. And Harvey Weinstein, the Punisher. In Hollywood, a lot of people called him that, the Punisher, because he really had a reputation for being a guy who punished anyone who got in his way. It was impressive, even though a lot of people knew about his dirty methods. And also all that buzz about the abuses that were going on, one way or another the guy just kept growing. He was building a network of relationships that went far beyond cinema, expanding rapidly in business. In 2005, he even left Disney and created the Weinstein Company, WC, now finally with his own name on it. And I guarantee you've seen this logo before a lot of movies. And to achieve all this, he often didn't play fair. In his strategies to win awards at the Oscars, for example, there were indirect attacks on competitors, campaigns against rival films, and backstage pressure. He organized several private screenings of his own films, sent copies directly to each member of the Academy, personally called the voters, watched, influenced, pressured, and intimidated. And here's the thing, this was in a context where theoretically nobody even wanted to know who these voters were. But he knew, or found a way to know. And what I find funny is thinking about everyone watching the Oscars, debating who seemed likely to win, who was wronged, as if that was just a fair competition between movies. But the truth is, there has always been a lot of dirt and politics going on behind this whole ceremony. And it wasn't Harvey who started that. From the very beginning, back in 1927, when Louise Meyer, the head of MGM, helped create the Academy, the idea already involved creating this desire within the industry. The award became the ultimate ambition in cinema, and winning one meant a huge leap in your career, a change of status. Just so you have an idea of the professional leap this brought, Jennifer Lawrence in 2012 earned about $500,000 to make that Hunger Games movie. In the same year, she did Silver Linings Playbook, a theoretically smaller movie which earned her the Oscar. And guess who produced and distributed that movie? Yeah, him. But anyway, the thing is that after she won the Oscar, her fee for the second Hunger Games movie, which came just a year later, her fee jumped to about $10 million. That's the Oscar effect, and that's just for actors. This applies to all in the industry. So think about this. If there's a guy who can influence this system, who can somehow deliver this result that everyone wants so much, just imagine the power he has there, right? And this guy was Harvey. He was so untouchable. People needed him, and he took advantage of that.
Harvey Weinstein had an incredibly complex machine designed to maintain silence around this.
Since the 1980s, there were already rumors of abuse. Stories circulated backstage about actresses and models who were sexually harassed by him. It was almost always the same story. He would pick a newcomer from the crowd, promise her she would advance, invite her to private meetings, then take her to his hotel. And suddenly the guy would show up in a bathrobe, ask for a massage, make insinuations, get aggressive, and force himself on her. Sometimes they gave in. But when his victim showed resistance, he would resort to pressure. He said that's how the industry worked, that it was normal, part of the process. It was kind of implied that if you refused, your career could stall. But if you gave in, maybe doors would open for you. In fact, when the accusations started to surface, one of Harvey's victims said that during his attempt to convince her, he even mentioned the actress Jennifer Lawrence. According to the victim, he allegedly said, "I slept with Jennifer Lawrence and look where she is now. She just won an Oscar."
Harvey, thank you for killing whoever you had to kill to get me up here today.
The famous actress Gwyneth Paltrow, who also won an Oscar at a young age after that controversial film Shakespeare in Love by Harvey, went through this at the beginning of her career. She reported that she was called to a hotel room and that Weinstein suggested a massage. At the time, she said she told her boyfriend Brad Pitt everything, who even confronted Harvey. He was one of the few who stood up to him. But after that, the case was hushed up. And that's what happened repeatedly. Every now and then, there was always someone accusing him of abuse, but people ignored it because being against him could mean the end of your career. For your career, it was better to have him on your side.
I didn't have the guts to do anything about it. I think the deal I'd made with the devil was to my advantage.
It was only in 2017 that things started to go sour. Suddenly, it was all over the newspapers, right in front of everyone. The guy was accused of abuse by more than 80 women. The situation had reached a point where it was impossible to keep ignoring it. He was kicked out of his own company, removed, and then convicted, getting more than 20 years in prison. And even though justice was served, you can't ignore the fact that the guy spent a long time doing this without anything at all happening. The actors themselves knew, important people in the industry knew, and even so, they were there, thanking him in their speeches, celebrating victories together. And even worse, afterwards, we still had to watch those same people come up on stage to lecture the public. Or hypocrisy. The industry that loves to lecture the public with ideological speeches was the same one that turned a blind eye to this scandal. And this goes way beyond Harvey. There have already been cases like that within the industry. Seriously, like Bryan Singer's, who was accused for decades of abusing boys and went unpunished for a long time, who is still treated as a genius of cinema, despite all the accusations going around. And also, how can we not mention director Roman Polanski, who drugged and raped a girl in 1977? And what was Hollywood's response to that? An Oscar in 2003 for Best Director.
And the Oscar goes to Roman Polanski.
Look at him there clapping. And what bothers me the most is seeing this. These same people who clap and idolize these guys want to lecture everyone else about morals, just like they did recently with the actor Timothée Chalamet, who in an interview went and spoke badly about ballet and opera.
And I don't want to be working in ballet or opera or things where it's like, hey, or keep this thing alive, even though no one cares about this anymore.
A lot of people in Hollywood and around the world got really upset about this statement. They canceled the guy, saying it was unacceptable, disrespectful, and a devaluation of art. They turned this into such a huge scandal that it seemed like he had crossed some outrageous moral line. Anyone who watched the recent Oscars must have noticed how they made a point of singling him out, ridiculing him, and humiliating him. And fine, do whatever you want. While they mock the guy who criticizes ballet and opera, they still spend years awarding and celebrating without any shame. Who did much worse, and what I'm getting at is that there's a clear double standard about what's considered unacceptable. When something harms the industry's image or reputation, it becomes a scandal and everyone calls it offensive, serious, and unforgivable. But when their own interests are at stake, when reporting something unacceptable involves powerful people, money, influence, then they pretend it's not their problem.
Everybody kind of knew about Harvey, but nobody was saying anything publicly.
The actress Jessica Barth was abused by Harvey, and she told a few people, including her friend Seth MacFarlane, who in the middle of presenting the Oscar-nominated actresses, went up there and said this.
I'm Seth MacFarlane, the host of the Oscars. Congratulations, you 5 ladies no longer have to pretend to be attracted to Harvey Weinstein.
But even though he threw this in everyone's face, nobody did anything.
Honestly, there wasn't any reaction after that. I guess they still wanted to make movies and collect their awards and just go on their merry way.
And that tells us a cruel truth about society. In general, nobody really cares about morals. Everything is about self-interest. Morality shows up when it's convenient, when it helps you promote yourself, gain approval, or build a positive public image. But when it comes into direct conflict with your real interests, then it doesn't matter anymore. Because in practice, upholding the morals you claim to have comes at a cost that almost no one is willing to pay. And this isn't exclusive to Hollywood. It happens everywhere, because the dynamic is always the same. So just as Einstein took advantage of the power he had in the film industry to spend decades abusing without consequence, Padiri did something very similar in music. Jeffrey Epstein in the political and business environment. Completely different markets, but the mechanism is always the same. At the bottom, there are people desperately trying to climb up, and at the top, there are people who have already made it, and they know exactly how to exploit that desire. They know that most people won't confront them, they won't go head-to-head with those in power, because they depend on them. And that's why these cases persist. That's why they show up so often. Because in practice, even if people don't admit it, most are not guided by morals. If they were, these cases probably wouldn't be so frequent. But since everyone is desperate to get their rewards above all else, it creates an environment where impunity prevails. And when that happens, guys like Harvey will always be around.
So what? So what? At least we did a good job.
I just released on the Warman platform a documentary that explores several of these dark, successful figures. And it ends up revealing a lot of truths about this world that many people prefer to ignore. In the video on your screen, I explain a lot more, but if you prefer, you can go straight to the website warmanbrazil.com.br, where you'll find everything. Not just about this documentary, but about all the other valuable content available to those with access to the platform.